The UFC is going to the White House in 2026 on June 14th. And what I'm going to attempt to do in this video is build the most stacked card possible for the White House. And I think this is realistic. The UFC can put this together. Dana White's already talking about how it's going to be the most stacked card of all time. So I want to put the UFC to the test. And actually, I want to see how close I get with some of these matchups and compare it when the card actually comes out. So with that out of the way, I have 12 total fights for this card, and most of them are going to be American fighters, as it is the White House, which is the corporate of America. So let's get right into it, starting with the early prelim opener of Jim Miller versus Terrence McKinney. Of course, it would not be an American card without Jim Miller being on the card. This guy's fought at UFC 100, UFC 200, UFC 300, not to mention he's finished his last 10 wins, and Terrence McKinney has never fought to decision. So this is almost guaranteed to go to a finish, and just give Jim Miller his flowers for being in the UFC for so long, for competing at such a high level in a high sport since 2008. Imagine this guy fighting at UFC 100, 200, 300, and then the White House. So I think Jim Miller versus Terrence McKinney would be an absolute banger to open the card with. Let's get on to the next fight. On the early prelims, Joe Pyfer versus Jared Cannonier. Now, it would not be a White House card also without having the saltiest American man in the history of the country. Honestly, Joe Pyfer might just be the saltiest man alive. It's either him or Jamal Hill, but him versus Jared Cannonier, two power punchers at middleweight. This would be an excellent fight. Also, rankings-wise, it somewhat makes sense. Joe Pyfer, I believe, just entered the rankings, or he's close to the rankings, and Jared Cannonier is ranked like number 10 or 11. Let's see if Joe Pyfer can take that next step. Like, he can beat the Abus Magomedovs of the world, the Kelvin Gaslams, but can he beat the Jared Cannoniers of the world, who's been in a title fight before, who's been a perennial contender in the middleweight division? Obviously, Jared Cannonier is a really good fighter, and if you can beat him, you might be looking to the top 5. So I think this would be a great addition to the early prelims of the White House card. Moving on to the next fight, Bo Nickel versus Kelvin Gastelum. And no, we're not doing our Bo Nickel on the main card of the White House. Absolutely not. First of all, Bo Nickel's not a big name, and he doesn't deserve it. He's not even ranked. He's not a champion. He's not any of that. So let's stop with the nonsense, UFC. If Bo Nickel's on the main card of the White House, it's ridiculous. He should be on the early prelims, or the prelims. This is the prelims. Bo Nickel versus Kelvin Gastelum. Now, I contemplated putting Kelvin Gastelum on the card because, you know, he's missed weight a ton of times. Surely the UFC is not going to want to reward this guy for missing weight, but it is what it is. 185, Kelvin Gastelum versus Bo Nickel. This would be a good test for Bo Nickel because I do think he's going to get past Adolfo Vieira. This would be a good test for Bo Nickel in the striking because I don't think he'd be able to take down Kelvin Gastelum, who kind of has brick wall takedown defense. So it'd be a striking match. And can Bo Nickel outstrike Kelvin Gastelum? This would be a scrap. And listen, Kelvin Gastelum always has a chance to KO Bo Nickel. He has good power, but Bo Nickel could also maybe be the first guy to finish Kelvin Gastelum. You never know. Either way, battle of the Americans, the guy who's a small middleweight versus the guy who can't put down the tacos. I think this would be a great addition to the prelims. Moving on to the next fight, the rematch, Derek Lewis versus Curtis Blaydes. This would be an absolute banger. The first fight, I think, going down in 2021, 2022, Derek Lewis KO'd Curtis Blaydes brutally going in for a takedown, and I'm sure Curtis Blaydes wants that revenge. This obviously is a heavyweight banger. You got to have a heavyweight banger on the prelims just to get the fans excited, and this is almost guaranteed to end in a knockout, as I think out of these guys, both these guys' fights, they've only been to decision less than 5 times, so this is almost guaranteed to be a knockout in the rematch. And listen, man, for Curtis Blaydes, you want to get that rematch back. I know Derek Lewis is way down in the rankings, but let's be real, Curtis Blaydes is really far from a title shot. This guy's lost to Aspinall. He's lost to a couple other guys up in the division, Pavlovich. So he beat Almeida, of course, but it's not like Curtis Blaydes is on a short line for a title shot. So I think a rematch with him versus Derek Lewis for the White House card would be perfect on the prelims. Book it, guaranteed to end in a knockout. Let's get on to the next fight, which would be Kevin Holland versus Colby Covington. Yes, it would not be a White House card without Colby Covington on it because this guy literally has "We the People" tattooed on his chest, and he's one of the biggest advocates for Trump as president. Whether that's real nor fake is, I don't know. But nonetheless, Kevin Holland, the most active fighter in UFC history versus potentially one of the most inactive fighters in UFC history. Holland versus Covington. This fight has been tossed around and talked about for a bit. Colby Covington is already on his hands and knees begging the UFC, Hunter Campbell, Dana White to be on the White House card. Of course he wants to, and what better way for Colby Covington to retire in his career than to fight Kevin Holland? And I would pick Colby Covington to beat Kevin Holland because let's be real, Kevin Holland these days, he's one of the most inconsistent fighters in UFC history. And if Colby Covington puts in his cardio sessions with the Miami Mamacitas, then I think there's a good chance he wins this fight. So Colby Covington versus Kevin Holland on the prelims. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? This is going to be one of the most stacked cards of all time. It's got to be. It might be the most stacked card of in UFC history because Dana White said they're going to make it as such. Let's get on to the next fight. Drew Dober versus Michael Chandler. The Giga Chad versus the fake motivational the fake motivational speaker is what I meant to say. Michael Chandler versus Drew Dober. This is almost guaranteed to end in fireworks / a knockout. Both these guys are just big juggernauts that go in throwing caution to the wind, looking to take your head off. Both typically low IQ fighters that are just literally looking for the knockout. Drew Dober has the second most knockouts in lightweight history. Michael Chandler has no fight IQ, but he will just throw big overhands to entertain the fans. So in terms of entertainment value, and both these guys are American, this is a perfect fight to make an absolute barn burner and banger for the fans. So I think this is a must on the prelims. Yes, I said it, on the prelims. Drew Dober versus Michael Chandler. And that just goes to show you how stacked this card is if this is on the prelims, because headlining the prelims, Dan Hooker versus Justin Gaethje. There's no shame in being on the prelims of the White House card if you're Justin Gaethje. It's the White House card, arguably the greatest card in UFC history, and you're headlining the prelims. This would be beautiful. And again, another fight that's almost guaranteed to be a war. Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje, they were booked to fight before. Obviously, Hooker's fighting Sarukian, but win or lose, Justin Gaethje, he's going to lose if he fights to Topuria. Dan Hooker's probably going to lose to Sarukian, most likely. So book these guys together at the White House. This is guaranteed to be an absolute banger. And this is going to be kind of Justin Gaethje's final send-off. I think he would have a perfect storybook ending to his career if he would fight Dan Hooker on the White House card, win the fight, which I would favor him to do, and then retire. So I think this is an amazing fight to headline the prelims. But let's get on to the meat and potatoes. Let's get on to the main card, starting off with Kamaru Usman versus Belal Muhammad. We've been waiting on this fight for a long time. Now they've dropped the ball once again. They've booked Belal Muhammad versus Ian Gary. I think Ian Gary is going to school Belal Muhammad, which I don't care if that happens. I think Kamaru Usman versus Belal Muhammad, with the bad blood they have, with the backstory of the podcast, we need that podcast released to see if Muhammad really made Usman, cry. But nonetheless, this is a mirror matchup. Both wrestlers, both apparently got hands like Canelo, and I would just love the build up to this fight. Both guys are American born, although they're not ethnically American. But you get what I'm saying. Kamaru Usman versus Belal Muhammad would be an absolute banger. And I wanted this fight now, but I can wait to the White House. Please book it, UFC. We need to see these guys go back and forth. We need to see some bad blood. I want to see Belal Muhammad at the press conference talking about how he made Kamaru Usman cry. And then I want to see Kamaru Usman saying, all right, Belal, but when we get in there, it's all different. You know how Kamaru Usman starts talking when he's facing his opponent. But nonetheless, this could be the opener of the prelims. This would be an absolute banger. Two potentially top 10 welterweights of all time, or top 5 welterweights of all time, and Belal Muhammad versus Kamaru Usman versus each other. Let's get on to the second fight on the main card. Adesanya versus Sean Strickland, the rematch. Of course, you got to have a White House card with Sean Strickland on it versus Israel Adesanya, who a lot of people think that Israel Adesanya had an off night versus Sean Strickland, and this rematch is long overdue, man. Let's get it done. Sean Strickland's coming off 2 losses to Dricus du Plessis. Adesanya's on a 3-fight losing streak. They're both coming off losses. It's a perfect fight to make. I know it's 8 months down the road, but listen, I got my tinfoil hat on. I got my binoculars on. I'm seeing into the future. I could see this fight on the White House card, and I would favor Adesanya to lose against Strickland. I would favor Strickland to beat Adesanya again, because I just think that Adesanya's past his prime. He's slower, he's chinnier, and I think Strickland's still closer to his prime, and he's taking some time off. So Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya on the second fight of the main card of the White House. I think this would be an absolute perfect matchup for the fans. And like I said, Sean Strickland, the Ultimate American. Got to have him on the card. Let's get on to the feature fight. A lot of people have been calling this for a long time. Sean O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. This is a striker's delight. And I can't talk today, sorry. A striker's delight. Sean O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. Yes, they're both coming off losses to Merab, but no shame in losing to Merab. He's the greatest bantamweight and one of the greatest fighters of all time. Nonetheless, these guys, we've been wanting to see it for a long time. They're two of the best strikers in the UFC Bantamweight division and potentially in UFC Bantamweight history. They're both electric on the feet, and this would be an absolute chess match. And I'm curious to see if O'Malley will be able to knock out Sandhagen or Sandhagen can knock out O'Malley. And it's one of the most high-level striking matchups you can put across the UFC. And yeah, we've all been calling for it for a long time. Both of these guys are American. It's a perfect fight. Put it on the White House card, feature fight. Maybe you could put it as the main card opener. Either way, this fight on the White House card would be perfect. We have to see it. Let's get on to the co-main event. Charles Oliveira just submitted Mateusz Gamrot. What better way to return to the UFC White House card against Max Holloway for the BMF belt? Let's be real, guys. Charles Oliveira's never sniffing the UFC title again. He's too old. He's 35. He's not beating Norman. He's not beating Taporia. He's just got too many mouths. So the next best thing for him would be the BMF belt versus Max Holloway. These guys had a fight way back when in 2016. Charles Oliveira had an injury. Let's run it back 10 years later, literally a decade later. Oliveira versus Holloway for the BMF belt. And this would be cinema, man. This would be fireworks. Max Holloway is the ultimate American fighter. This guy is Hawaiian pride versus Brazilian pride, but Hawaii is obviously part of America, so he is American. But yeah, Oliveira versus Holloway for the BMF title, the rematch, and I think this would be perfect, man. Can Max Holloway's chin hold up against the Brazilian bomber? No, it's not the Brazilian bomber. Charles Oliveira, can he extend his finishing streak and finish Max Holloway and submit him? Would it be something for Charles Oliveira to come back and submit Max Holloway nearly a decade later? And let's get on to the main event. Spoiler alert, it's not John Jones. Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. Yes, I think that Aspinall is going to breeze right through Cyril Gane. I'm making an assumption. I think it's going to be correct. And Alex Pereira has already said he's got a broken foot. He's going to be out for a while. He wants to return on the White House card. Pereira versus Aspinall is the biggest fight in terms of like the casuals you can make in the UFC. Pereira is known amongst the casuals. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion, which the heavyweight champion, you know, casuals love the heavyweight fights. They love to see big guys throw down for a big knockout. This is perfect to headline the White House card. Yes, I know it's not two American fighters, but we don't have any American champions outside of Kayla Harrison right now. So this is kind of what we're stuck with. So yeah, man, this is the White House card. I mean, look on the screen, look at these fights and tell me this would not be the most stacked card in UFC history if you can put this fight together. Now, obviously, a lot of people in the comments and a lot of people watching this video will say this is far-fetched. This would never happen. The UFC could never put on a card this magnitude. And while I agree with you, we can only hope this is the biggest card in UFC history and the UFC delivers. Dana White's gassing it up. You know how he does. He's already talking about how the White House card is going to be the biggest in UFC history. He's already talking about how he doesn't need John Jones on the card, which is a great sign, man. We need to move on from John Jones. This guy's dragged the UFC, dragged America through the mud, made us look bad. We do not need John Jones on the White House card. He doesn't deserve it. All these guys on the screen deserve to fight on the White House card. And this is the card I built for you guys to go down on June 14th, 2026 for the White House card. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you have a better card, put it down below. Is this card too far-fetched? Drop a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'm out, guys. Deuces.